This is the video about Foundations of the Earth, a new realistic landscape library for Blender featuring the drag-and-drop mountains, canyons and so much more. Let's unpack it and see what it can do. How to install Foundations of the Earth. In the Preferences Asset Libraries, I have installed it already. It's just a matter of pressing plus and adding the version that you've bought. It's 4K for me. So that's the Pro version of the first volume of the Foundations of the Earth I'm going to be using in this video. The assets in the first volume include landforms generated using Gaia, a specialized terrain generation software. These terrains have been exported as meshes, complete with baked texture maps and materials, all fully set up for Blender. There's also the Utilities pack to install. You should be able to find it in your downloads. It includes essential utility nodes specifically designed for landscape material workflows, such nodes as the Z-axis masker, the camera view blend, the slopes masking tool, the PBR blending tools, and various useful additions. After installation, don't forget to save preferences. And then we should be able to access it in the asset browser now. Open the asset browser, click the All Libraries drop-down, select Foundations of the Earth, and there you will find all the landforms with different LODs or levels of details. In fact, you can filter it out by LODs. What you can do, for instance, is just type LOD 0 here, and the models will get sorted out by this level of detail. And then you can expand these tabs as well and filter it out by landform types: canyons, depressions, expanses, and so on. If you want to resize the thumbnails, you can do it from here. Then you can simply drag these landforms into your scene. If you cannot see the mesh in the viewport, it's because it's actually huge, so we need to zoom out a bit to see it. And if it gets clipped like that, and it will because it's a huge 500 meters wide mesh, then the maximum view distance will need to be adjusted. So I'll just type in an extra 0 at the end, making it 10 kilometers. These assets should render nicely in both Cycles and Eevee, and even though some of the features such as Micropolygon displacement will only work in Cycles, this product is clearly meant for both render engines. Speaking of LODs, again, there are multiple LODs available, 0 being the highest level in terms of poly count, and 4 being the most optimized one. The LOD numbers may change in the future updates though. Comparing LODs 0 and 4, you'd be surprised to see they actually look almost indistinguishable thanks to normal mapping and high-resolution textures, despite the obvious poly count difference that is. The difference between the highest LOD of 1.1 million vertices and the lowest one being just 79k vertices. It was made possible by baking the high-resolution details to texture maps in Gaia for different levels of details, that is. Not to mention the multiple color passes and the masks, which is the secret sauce of this asset pack, really. So bonus points from me for including the optimized asset versions and making it look really consistent with their higher resolution counterparts. Having different LODs has interesting implications. For instance, we can work with the lower resolution model, then replace it with a higher definition one. What you can do is just select one mesh, then shift-click the other one, and then Ctrl-C to copy the location and other transforms as needed. This way we can seamlessly replace one level of detail with another. In addition to blocking out the landscape really quickly without having to jump to World Machine or Gaia to generate new landforms, it is in fact pretty convenient to just customize these meshes right in Blender, just by pushing and pulling vertices with proportional editing in the edit mode, for instance, and more, using different kinds of modifiers like Lattice, cause well, it's meshes, they're editable, as James has made it clear in the main tutorial available on his YouTube channel.
Stay classy.
My god. The real secret sauce of Foundations of the Earth, though, is this uber material with meticulously baked colors, normals, and a shitload of masks. The masks generated in Gaia based on erosion, peaks, protrusions, and other properties of the generated landforms, available as black and white texture maps unique for every asset. Anyway, some of these textures are disabled by default to conserve memory, and all of them feed into this mega node where the magic truly happens. By blending these maps, you can create entirely different climates and styles, ranging from fertile valleys to barren deserts, or even shifting between seasons. Clever, right? Further down the pipeline, this supergroup flows into the principled BSDF shader. However, the real magic happens here within this group. As we've mentioned, by default the height map and masks are disabled, but we can select them like that and hit M to unmute them. Then to enter this group, we can hit Tab. There, all these texture maps that we have access to can actually be used to influence the color and other properties of the main shader. The multiple colors included are basically the variations of the landscape base colors, so you can quickly go through different looks. Ctrl-Shift-Click can be used for scrolling through these inputs if you just want to have a look at all these maps using Node Wrangler. There are a lot of them. Then, to exit the group, you can click this icon, or press Ctrl-Tab. Then just Ctrl-Shift-Click on the main material to see it again. Custom colorization. Among the maps you'll find two mysterious inputs, Texture A and Texture B. These textures are actually meant to give us some baseline for recoloring the terrain. With the help of the color ramp, for example, you can either create the desired colorization by holding Ctrl and clicking the color ramp, or you can use the eyedropper to sample the colors from any image just by clicking and dragging across it like that until the ramp fills up. Pretty nice, Then these stops can be distributed however you want, then adding the RGB curve before and after is a quick way of altering the colors, or just pick another image to sample another set of colors. Applying materials from one landform to another. What's really cool about the climate-based texture sets is how they're made to stay consistent across different landforms. What does it mean? Let's have a look. So this group contains the climate mix, and multiple landforms can share it. We just need to assign the same node group to different objects' materials. Then any change that happens inside that group will automatically propagate to every object sharing it, speeding the creation process considerably. Watch out for the masks though. If applying the mask doesn't show for all or some of the landforms, it's because, as we've mentioned, by default some textures are turned off and need to be activated within each material. Each and every. For instance, you may notice that the masks doesn't work on some of the landforms, but now you should know where to turn them on, so it shouldn't be much of a problem anymore. To get the best of both worlds, make the changes that affect all the meshes sharing a climate mix within that group, but for unique tweaks, apply them directly to the material itself. If you want to adjust something separately, you know. Texturing. What texturing options we'd better be aware of when working with foundations of the Earth? Here are some things that you might want to know as a user. First of all, the pre-baked color textures. That's a quick and easy way of playing with the different looks. Then a slightly more advanced method is mixing it with some other colors using one of the masks, like the flow masks, which are terrific in my opinion. Alternatively, the procedural textures can be used. A good old 3D noise, for example, used as a mask, probably accompanied by the color ramp to adjust its contrast. Or it can be used as a custom colorization pass, the procedural noise. Multiply, color or overlay modes are usually a good start. Or if you want to take it a step further, there is the super noise preset that you can get for free from our Gumroad. It is a self-repeating noise pattern with a slightly different distribution of big, medium and small shapes, which works pretty well for this kind of a job. Otherwise, it is as simple to use as a regular procedural texture. Image textures and tiling. Even though the built-in color maps are actually really good and contain enough variety, if your scene demands you get close to the surface, the pixels may become quite blurry. That's a natural limitation of the non-tiled textures. Then the tileable textures from Polyhaven or Ambient CG or other resources can be used to add as much detailization as you want. The texture needs to go into the color input inside the climate group. Ctrl-T to add the texture, coordinate and the mapping nodes. Now the issue with tiling any textures across larger surfaces is that a repeating pattern becomes quite obvious. There are different ways to deal with it. For instance, Erindale has an amazing node pack for untiling repeatable patterns. There's also the Scattershot paid add-on that does a great job breaking up patterns too. Here I'm using the Arendale's Becher node. It scatters the texture while dithering the seams. Clever stuff. Whether it works good or not that good depends on the texture, ultimately. Here it works just great. Then textures can be mixed with other textures to help hide the repetition furthermore. By blending it like that, we make it slightly harder for the viewer to find the repeating pattern. By the way, here's a neat little trick. The light and blend mode works in the darker areas only, potentially helping to hide the details that reveal the tiling pattern even more. And the darken mode could be used to get rid of the excessive splotchiness in the brighter areas. Then any texture can be used as a mask too, to help further untile our tileable textures, like this grungy texture, together with color ramp to fine-tune it. Sometimes it could be tricky to get the higher frequency details right using image textures as masks. You see, sometimes it just doesn't have enough resolution, and it looks a bit splotchy, and if you tile it, you lose the bigger shapes, so it's a conundrum. So wouldn't it be nice if we could use something like the fractal detail inherent to procedural noise? Well, thankfully James got us covered. There's the Map Grower utility node that does something similar. Tab to expand this node, find the image texture node and hit tab again, then simply choose the texture. Then the way this works is that the Map Grower node combines 3 scales, big, medium and small, into a single map. Map Grower. It excels in hiding the excessive tiling, particularly for masks. In its current implementation, and that may change in the future versions, I believe, I would mostly use it to enhance the masks. One key thing to keep in mind for efficient texturing is texture coordinates though. By default, if you plug in a new image texture, it will use the UV coordinates, because all these models have been UV unwrapped. The issue though is that way the texture tiling won't be consistent across different landforms, causing the disconnect where 2 surfaces meet. Using an empty object as an anchor point for the object texture coordinates is a really effective way to create seamless texture. The texture that would be mapping across multiple meshes. By basing the texture coordinates on the empty's position, rotation and scale, you can ensure the texture flows continuously, making it look like all the meshes are part of the unified surface, much like the 2000's liquid metal in Terminator 2 blended seamlessly with the checkerboard floor. Fucking coffee! Projection modes. The object coordinates with the flat texture projection mode work really well for horizontal surfaces. However, they struggle with the vertically stretched surfaces, causing a noticeable texture stretching. Box projection, on the other hand, projects texture from multiple directions, so it handles the vertical surfaces much better. Although at the cost of some visible seams where the projections meet, which nevertheless can be blended a bit with the help of the blend slider. It's possible to get the best of both worlds by combining flat projection for horizontal surfaces and box projection for vertical ones. You can mix between them using the slopes mask, one of the utility nodes included in the pack, separating areas based on their incline. The slope can be controlled using the color ramp node, by the way. Then if it looks a bit too clean, you can add an extra bit of chaos directly in this node. So you can do something like that, the grass covering flatter surfaces, while rocky textures are applied to the steeper vertical stretches of terrain. Then yet another handy utility node from this pack is normal blending, which does exactly what its name suggests. Simply plug a tileable normal map into the detail normal socket, and use the multiplier to control the strength of the effect. This is a great way to add that extra layer of fake surface detail, whether it's a subtle fine grain or pronounced bumps. Some other question that I had in mind while testing this pack is how to hide the transition between the meshes. Let's say if you connect it like this, then how to get rid of that seam. There are different methods of doing it, proportional editing being one of them. Select the vertex, enable then proportional editing right here with the smooth fall off by default, G to move, and use the mouse wheel to adjust the fall off. It's one of the benefits of having to work with good old 3D meshes as opposed to displacement maps or anything like that. It is the fact that you can simply edit it like that. Or you can sculpt it, for that matter. The sculpting tools work perfectly fine with landforms, and it works so quickly. The draw or grab brushes are a great fit for this task. Damn, the sculpting performance is notoriously good nowadays in Blender. So that is how you can approach hiding the connection between various surfaces or various landforms. Then finally the texture work will finish the job. For instance, the flow masks work pretty cohesively across the meshes, and as such could also be used to hide the transition more or less. Actually, let's take a moment to praise 3D meshes some more. The way Foundations of the Earth is set up is obviously having parts of the terrain generated in special software. It is Gaia, for that matter. It is perfectly suited for this kind of a job. And then the exports end up as regular 3D meshes, and as such they can be used for kit bashing landscapes, or as James calls it, land bashing. This workflow naturally allows for some cool mesh editing, for instance proportional editing. It can be enabled over here, and it allows for a smooth adjustment with a fall-off controlled via the mouse wheel. Using proportional editing we can customize the meshes in a variety of creative ways. Like you can make craters or twist the terrain into, I don't know, a vortex-like deformation like that, while having a complete control over this effect. Or, I don't know, you can twist it around some point in space, around the 3D cursor that is. There's plenty of opportunities to have some fun. Or booleans. Boolean operations work great with the FOTE landforms. Play with the solver method to get the result you want. Maybe we can place Suzanne here. Nice. Or we can just trim the shape of our landforms rather easily. That is, in any way we like. This is something that's really straightforward with the ready-made meshes. Who's barking there? And the 3D meshes can obviously be enhanced by modifiers like Lattice. And if you're coming from 3ds Max, I imagine this is probably a feature that you can be ecstatic about. Really, Lattice is so versatile, it's far more powerful than it seems at first glance. I actually picked up a few tricks with it from a tutorial James sent my way before you had the chance to watch it, so I had a bit of a head start here. For instance, you can use the Lattice modifier to skew a mesh in a specific direction, creating a unique and interesting look. I tell you, it looks simple, but it's really effective. You gain more control over localized deformations, making it perfect for crafting natural features like craters, hills and valleys. It's like sculpting, but with non-destructive precision. Adding even more segments combined with proportional fall-off opens the door to more dynamic effects, like swirling hurricane-like shapes. Cool use for modifiers, as Jim also pointed out, is having the mesh mirrored first, using an empty as a mirror object, placed as where you want the mirroring to happen, which is the end point of this mesh over here, right here, while merging the ends, until that pesky seam between the meshes disappears, ultimately making this landform tileable. And then combining it with the array modifier to repeat and extend this tileable chunk into a valley, again merging the ends. Woo! It's just so great. And we can chain modifiers, like we can deform it along a curve. I mean, the lattice deformed along the curve with the curve modifier, so it becomes a procedural terrain to a certain extent. That is awesome, right? Just imagine the possibilities. Now I got carried away by a burb. My favorite part is then to have some fun with the lighting and all of that, as if there is no burbs. The aerial perspective, which helps to sell the scale of whatever terrain you're creating, so usually having at least some fog by a principled volume is really helpful. Maybe even some non-uniform clouds as well, just using the noise texture here as a density. If you are looking to learn more about rendering realistic clouds in Blender, I highly recommend checking out Samuel Krug's YouTube channel. Samuel is known for that stuff. Samuel's channel also features some amazing terrain creation tips as well. There's a lot to see and learn. And this is one of the Samuel's free VDB clouds that you can download there. Here it is, rendered over the gym's terrain, of course. Now that's a collaboration. Here's a bit of a 3D scene I quickly put together while testing this pack. Essentially, it's built on the lattice deformation idea, skewing the entire structure to make it more pointed and dramatic, I suppose. I typically experiment with this sky texture to begin with. Nishita sky texture is a great choice since you can play with the sun disk right away, perfectly in sync with the halo brightness. Or I usually just set up the sun lamp separately anyway to have slightly more control over it. Then the volumetric clouds layer is a great way to add some visual interest by casting a shadow pattern over the entire thing, creating a dappled light effect. The contrast or density of that cloud layer can be controlled naturally via the color ramp. And I think that this simple directional deformation idea, together with this lighting scheme, worked really well. Alright, let's dive into some more advanced techniques now. This stuff might not be absolutely essential, but it really pushes the boundaries of what you can do with the assets from foundations of the Earth. Like Micropolygon displacement that only works in cycles. Each asset from the FOTE pack includes a height map, and it's possible to apply it to a subdivided plane as displacement. Again, it only works in cycles. The experimental feature set has to be turned on. Well, it's been experimental for 10 years already. Then adaptive subdivision also turned on. The subdiv resolution controlled from this panel. By default it's set to 8, but usually I set it to 2 for a higher quality. The height map passed through the displacement node should be connected over there. And finally, the displacement settings should be switched over from bump only to something else, mentioning displacement. And then it should start working. I mean the micropolygon tessellation and physical displacement of that plane based on the height texture. Needless to say, that is A, super cool, and B, we can mix this data with any other texture like procedural, super noise, to change the elevation of the terrain on the fly, I mean. A bonus of using micropolygon displacement is adaptivity. Once you get closer to the surface, it causes its geometry resolution to recalculate and adapt, but only for what's currently in the camera's frustum. That's also really cool, I think. Let's turn our attention to bump mapping though. Where does bump mapping fit into the picture here? Well, there's a normal map for each landform, as we remember, encoding the information about the surface imperfections, but then we can plug something else in the displacement slot as well, with the bump map only mode being selected here. Like this texture, for instance. But we'll still need the displacement node. Oh, the irony. Well, upon cranking up the bump map strength, it should add a new layer of surface detail on top of the normal map. So to think of it, that's an alternative to the normal blending node, I guess. Then to add a bit more natural variation to this bump layer, we can mix it with some procedural noise, or rather use procedural noise to bring down the bump map strength in some areas, so it's not consistently rough all over the place. As a quick tip, I've separated the green channel of that grassy texture and assigned the sheen shader to it. It was formerly called the velvet shader. This shader helps to simulate the microfiber structure found in the fuzzy surfaces like hair, some fabrics, or grass for that matter. Burb feathers. Alright, a few more words about the slopes and the Z-height utility nodes. I started making this scene by deforming these landforms with the help of proportional editing. Then it was a matter of adding a pretty harsh sunlight as the key source of illumination. Don't be shy about using area lights as well, placed pretty close to the scene, as it's perfectly fine to use them. I give you my permission. Then the colors are up to you. Personally, I like this one. The slopes node, once again, is perfect for isolating or masking surfaces based on their inclination. It's controlled by the color ramp, which of course can be reversed to capture only the steepest slopes if needed. And it can be colorized as well instead of using it as a mask. Then the Z-axis masker works similarly, but it focuses on elevation instead. This can be a highly efficient way of color coding your terrain based on height. The breakup settings to be found in the node itself. I gave it a greenish tint at the bottom, gradually transitioning to neutral gray at the top, and blended it with the slope gradient, almost replacing it, to think of it, but not quite. I love playing with volumetric clouds, you know. The noise texture in the volume shader density is all we need, more often than not, to create all sorts of dynamic cloud shadow effects. Yet another advanced technique I want to talk about is geometry nodes for scattering stuff. In this scene I thought I want to try nighttime, so I set up the Nishita sky shader, first of all imitating the night sky at a fairly low intensity. Then for the moon I added a regular sunlight, which kind of makes sense because the moon is also a sharper, smaller light source, similar to the sun. Then it mostly depends on the exposure and on the white balance, because the nighttime is usually portrayed with a cooler temperature, with a bluish tint in other words. The wider lenses can be an interesting thing to try to influence the distance and scale perception. It has a different look compared to something like 50mm, so it could be very well worth trying out. To capture some more textural detail, however fake, I used the normal blending node to overlay a custom tiled normal map, as the camera was really close to the ground. Then to take it a step further, I selected the polygons forming an area near the camera and duplicated them, so it became a separate mesh. Then I applied some real displacement to it, to not, apply it to the whole landscape, only where it matters. For scattering objects, first I created a subdivided plane, but how to align it with the ground? That was easy. The shrink wrap modifier did the job. That's how it just sticks to the surface. Now I've got geometry nodes set up for scattering these stones that I downloaded from Polyhaven, I believe. Relatively low poly meshes, or to be exact, the low but also the medium poly for these bigger stones. I used the procedural noise mask for distributing points on faces in Geonodes, and then instantiated the stone meshes on these points. So that's a cool little technique for adding real geometry detail exactly where it matters in the foreground. To tie it all together, I introduced some haze, of course. And that was it for this scene. Another advanced utility node included with the pack is PBR Mixer, or Map Mixer. It simplifies the process of combining multiple PBR shaders. From what I know, the node may change in the future updates, yet the way it works now is this. So here's, for example, the texture maps for the first material, a tileable sand type of a shader, and here we've got the second set of maps, a tileable, whatever, rocky grassy type. Then all these maps are connected to Map Mixer. What goes in goes out, and it just outputs the blended maps, which go into the main shader then. Here. It's important that it's blended using some mask, which can be anything, the noise texture or just some image. What's cool about this node is that it takes the height maps into consideration, which can be pretty tricky to set up yourself, but Map Mixer just makes it so easy. I find it pretty funny how mixing two materials with displacement can actually be used to produce landscapes. Then throw in some cloud shadows and maybe a bit of haze, and you've got a pretty cool terrain render. Alright, that's it for our exploration of foundations of the Earth. The quality of the assets speaks for itself. There's clearly a shitload of work involved. I'm sure James is gonna keep tweaking things in the future updates, including the utility nodes and more, and I'm excited to see what comes next. That's it for this one. Thanks for joining me. That was Gleb Alexandrov for CreativeShrimp.com. If you found this review helpful, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more awesome Blender content.